Alright, hey, how you guys doing? I'm just walking home. It's a nice day, it's a beautiful day. Look, I don't have a cap on, anything. It's a nice clear day in the sky, right? The skies are blue. Good day here in Toronto. Just got off work. Funny thing happened at work today. So I read announcements, right? When we have a conference call, I'll read some announcements. And I like to put on a radio voice. My background is theater. I've done some acting, all that kind of stuff. And so I really know how to kick it up. I really know how to do it. Hey, today here at the beaches, we're gonna lower the price of Lego 45% on JON Radio. All John, all the time. You know, you're reading from a script, and so it's easy to do. And everybody says the same thing to me afterwards. They always say, oh man, John, you should get into radio. Everybody says this. Oh, get into radio. And I'm like, and my response, you know, outside of work, of course, my response is always like, oh yeah, you show me where those radio jobs are. I'll get right on that radio job. Every single time. Because when I was going to school, and when I was consolidating and all that, when I was getting educated, all those radio jobs started getting merged. Businesses started to buy each other up. We went from like having something like 68 different radio stations to just like 6, you know. And so these corporate owners, these investor groups, they do what they do, which is streamline. They got to streamline it. And so rather than having like one guy talk to a couple thousand people, right? Just get that one guy to talk to a couple 100,000 people, you know? And rather than having, you know, one announcer, rather than having like 100 announcers, rather, you just need one. And so all those radio jobs, you know, they just go away, right? And you know, you think something like CBC, right? Like there used to be this idea of like a local radio station, local CBC, but now it's all national, right? It's just all the same, and maybe they'll have one per province or something like that. But like this whole, it's such a laugh because I know I would do really well in radio. I mean, listen to my voice. Listen how sweet I talk. I'm a sweet talker. No nonsense. And I know how to read from a script really well. I once read the entire Harry Potter series out loud. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was a glorious thing. So I'm well practiced. I know how to do it. But there's no jobs in that. It's like, oh, you want me to just, I'll just do radio. Okay. In this economy? I don't think so, man. I think I'm lucky I have a stable job at the moment. Going through kind of a fun moment, like a fun thing going on. Lots of retail environments, lots of retail places are closing, you know. If places are not outright closing, lots of big businesses are closing their stores, you know, closing stores that they feel aren't being profitable. And there's lots of restructuring happening. People are pairing and making concessions. It's pretty obvious that the economy that we're living in is not an economy of growth. Right now, it's clear that we're in an economy of consolidation. Without a doubt, that if a company is not closing businesses right now, if a company's not closing its doors or closing locations, that by itself is considered a resounding success. Because there are hundreds of stores, hundreds of brands that are closing locations, that are getting rid of things. So in this environment, you know, you just kind of grab hold of what you got if you feel you're being treated well at all, and you just ride it out. I consider myself very fortunate to be where I'm at, and very lucky that I found the little bit of stability that I actually have. You know, I see people all the time and they're doing jobs that they clearly hate. They obviously dislike, you know, but what can they do? This is where they're at. And no one's helping them, right? Like, certainly not the Ford government. Here in Ontario, the Ford government they're just like a raving pack of sociopaths. Just like, and I just want to clarify something on this. I don't consider that harsh language. I don't consider that like outrageous or uncivil to say that like these guys are acting like sociopaths, because they are. Like, we have corporations making hundreds of billions of dollars, hoarding away hundreds of billions of dollars, just making obscene profits. We're the wealthiest culture. Western culture is like the wealthiest culture that has ever existed. And yet we're cutting people's social services. We're arguing to like throw people into the streets. It's pretty gross. Like, and you take a look at their arguments, and their arguments generally boil down to like, oh well, these people who are disenfranchising and throwing into poverty, they're disgusting, pathetic losers in the first place. If they didn't want to get thrown out into the street, well, they should have been better like we are. It's pretty brutal, you know? It's these brutal kind of, you know, my daddy was rich, and so I'm rich, but I'm better than you. And that's what makes me better than you, is that I was born rich. We're born with more opportunity. And so I get to take advantage of you. And like right now here in Ontario, an empty Liberal chair is doing better in the polls than Doug Ford is. And Doug Ford still has like 20% support. I'm like, that's 20% too much. That means 1 in 5 people. It's way too high. That's way, 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 way too high. Like, it can't possibly be a thing for 20% of the populace is sitting there going like, yeah, we should disenfranchise poor people, we should throw them out on the streets. Yeah, they're just lazy, layabouts, don't do anything. Like, just this sort of Pontius Pilate view, like washing our hands of our responsibilities. And, well, this isn't my problem, I'll just wash my hands of it, and then what happens next is not my responsibility. So, you know, you don't need to think about it when your buddies are crucifying Christ, right? That's the funny thing, man, about that story. And I want to be real clear when I get talking about Bible stuff. Not when I get talking about Bible shit. It's a story. Like Harry Potter is a story. You know, but it's a good story. And it bugs the crap out of me that we've relinquished control of that story to idiots and heretics and people who don't read it. And then the people who do read it, well, they don't actually care about it. They don't actually care about the Great Commandment. You know, they don't actually care about the Sermon on the Mount. They don't actually care about the things that Christ said and the things that he stood for and the historical position of Christianity. They care about using the Bible as a document to enrich themselves. They're charlatans, heretics, losers and idiots who are more in line with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the people who stood against Christ than with Christ himself. Like, you're honestly telling me that you're clutching a Bible while telling a poor person that he should work harder while making yourself richer? It's brutal. Here you go, bud. Good luck out there, man. And I can't take it, you know? I can't take this bullshit that these these idiots, these evangelicals, these like I grew up in the Alliance churches, and you meet fine people, but then you break down what it is they think and what it is they believe, and they're essentially fascists. Like, they essentially think that, if you're a white, married landowner, then you're the best type of person. And if you're a non-white, non-landowning, common law, well, you're going to hell. So it's fine. And this sort of ideological perspective that, like, they believe they have the righteousness of God on their side, well, it means that anybody who disagrees with them, well, they're just a sinner, right? Obviously, I'm correct. I have the righteousness of God behind me. I know that's true because the book is magic, and the magic book says that I have magic, and magic is real. And I mean, I'm definitely talking about it in kind of a juvenile term, but it's because they think about it in a juvenile way, right? These sort of childish, juvenile thinkers who manage to spread this ideology through outright desperation, right? They feast upon the desperation of the populace. This, in my view, is why the Christian Evangelical Church is so determined to obliterate social services and obliterate welfare and obliterate all of these methods that we have to take responsibility for our most vulnerable citizens. It's because their ultimate desire is to fill up their own ranks. Because if you have nowhere else to go, if there is no community center, if there's no library system, if there is no hospital system, if there is no method to take care of these people and help them on their day-to-day lives, then the only place they have left to go are the people who are getting into the community and forming communities, i.e. the churches. And so the churches are naturally opposed to the idea of creating alternative methods to actually take care of people. And the church is the way that people are supposed to get their social community, their support systems. And I actually believe, like, if you can find a church that's actually forming decent social support systems, that's wonderful. But the evangelicals then turn around and are like, yeah, which is why we should be bombing the Middle East. What we've been witnessing, really, like, nobody in the media talks about this because it actually would force some introspection and thought into the conversation, which that's not what the media is there for. It's not for introspection. It's certainly not for thought. What we've been witnessing since the invasion of Iraq, certainly, maybe earlier, we've been witnessing another crusade. There's no other way to talk about it, right? In my view, like, you could say, oh yeah, we went in there for oil and all that, but the Crusaders were going in there for plunder and gold too. As much as they talked about the righteousness of Christ and all this kind of stuff, they were plunderers and thieves, and they went in to Muslim nations and invaded them for senseless reasons, for pointless reasons, for gold and money. Like, here's a fun story that comes out of the Crusades that I think is an interesting one, an interesting perspective to take. We keep telling the Robin Hood story, right? And the story is very simple, that the evil Prince John is overtaxing his citizens for his own lavishness and wealth. And this lavish overtaxation and disenfranchisement of Robin of Locksley leads to Robin fighting against the authority and taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor. Right, which, I don't know, that's a fine moral lesson, if you ask me. There's a little bit of Christ in there, of taking from the rich and giving to the poor, and the justice of that when you are faced with an unjust distribution of wealth. But the funny thing about Prince John is that Prince John is he's an actual historical figure. This isn't a fictional guy. And Prince John is the brother of King Richard, who goes off to the Crusades. And the story ends, the Robin Hood story always ends with Richard returning and then punishing John, and there being retribution. The thing is that King Richard, he kept going on this crusade and getting caught. They kept capturing him because he was a lousy field commander. He got captured on multiple occasions during the Crusades because he was terrible at what he was doing, when the Muslims were just better at warfare than he was. And so he had to continuously get ransomed back. They don't want to just kill this guy, right? He's worth a lot of money. And so what do? They ransom him back, right? And so how do they pay for that ransom? Well, dear John, I've been captured again. I need you to get X amount of dollars. John goes, I guess we're raising taxes. And then the peasantry goes, why are you raising our taxes? And John can't just say, well, you see, the king has been captured yet again in his holy war that he's fighting on behalf of God. And so he has to remain silent. And so then when Richard finally does come back from the Crusades, with much cheering by the peasantry, in public, Richard goes, yes, we'll punish this evil Prince John. And then he has to have turned around and been like, thank you, John, for your service to me. And then he gives him just some post somewhere else. And John leaves. And it's not much of a punishment to John. And so it's this kind of weird perspective that I feel is completely new, because that shows that Prince John was also a victim to this crusader mindset. That he wasn't evil, he was just entrapped in the Crusades. I'd watch that movie. I'd watch that movie. Okay, where's my little pug? Where's my little pug? There's my little pug. Look at that, I have a little pug. Yes, I do. We're gonna take a little pug break. Pug break, pug break, pug break. Yeah, you're such a good boy. Yes, you are, you're such a good boy. Yeah, we love the pug. Okay, Milo, don't get too cozy. I'm just gonna keep going with this video. We're just gonna take Milo out for a walk. Dropping that. Getting the pug. That's a perfect time. I just finished that story. What else is going on? Oh, you know what? I'll just keep talking about how Christ and the Crusades. So as we're in this crusade, right? We're in the middle of these crusades, which the Republican Party is owned and operated by this huge component of the Republican Party that is owned by the evangelical far-right Christians. Mike Pence, the vice president, is a true believer, like a true believer. He believes in Christ in the magical sense. Not in the solidarity or social justice sense, i.e. he doesn't actually listen to what Christ has to say, but in the magical sense, i.e. Christ is a superhero or a Jedi, right? He's a wizard, he has magical powers, and asserts his authority. Just look at my little guy. Isn't he the sweetest little guy? Ooh. Can you see? Okay. Just showing you the floor. Anyway. And so Christ's magical powers. And so the evangelicals, they've taken over, and they're just going along with Trump, right? Trump won the presidency, and they're all like, oh, well. And even though Trump is the antithesis of a Christian, they're still going along with it, because guess what? They're the antithesis of Christians too. They don't actually care about Christianity. They don't care about Christ. They don't care about any of that. They care about money for themselves, and they care about waging a holy war against the Muslim people, who they use the Bible as an excuse, as sort of the veneer. But at the end of the day, it's because they're racist, right? It's the same type of people who just went and kidnapped black people and enslaved them, right? They're fine with this, right? Muslims aren't even really people, right? They're just, that's their position, right? That, oh, they're not even really people, right? They're just sort of sub-people. Okay, buddy, don't need to be barking at anybody. I know, what a grumpy guy. What a grumpy grump. And so in the midst of all of this now, today is an interesting day, because today you have Bernie Sanders. Come on, buddy. Come on, buddy. Let's go. Have a good one. My little guy's curious, but also barky. He wants to get in people's nonsense, but he barks at them over it. So he's got this tomfoolery. Bernie Sanders in the middle of this. I just listened to an interview with Bernie Sanders. He's talking about foreign policy. He's like, war should be the absolute last resort. We absolutely should be in diplomacy with these people. And yeah, we should be. How about that? How about talking to these people? How about not launching bombs and assassinating people and drone strikes and all this whenever we kind of willy-nilly feel like it? And I just don't believe that he's going to make it. I just don't. You know? Too often in my life, I've gotten my hopes up for some politician or some kind of person to come in and do something meaningful and make a meaningful change. I think a lot of people are disillusioned because of Obama, right? That Obama was supposed to be this great hope and change candidate. No. Nothing changed. Little hope. And so now here's Bernie Sanders, and you have a whole new generation. College kids and young kids really are the forefront of this, and they're really the thrust, you know? And what's interesting about Sanders, though, unlike Obama, is that Sanders has the credibility. He's not a first-term senator, right? He's who works closely with the establishment Democrats. He's always said the things he's said. But at the end of the day, like, here's my deep fear, and something I've observed, and something that could be true, and this very election might prove it, is that the democracy that exists, like, we all know the media is bullshit, right? We all know that it's this illusionary, it creates illusions. It obfuscates. That's its role, is to act as an obfuscation device. And it does so, and the narrative currently is that it does so on behalf of corporate power. That corporations, these collections of very wealthy oligarchs, those are the problems. But I think about it slightly differently, which is that it's not a collection of wealthy oligarchs, although they certainly exist, but rather it's military. It's the people who run and operate the military who we should be deeply concerned about. That it is these people who tell the soldiers where to go and create the battle plans and all of this. These are the people who we should be paying attention to. Because the reality is, if the military generals decided, we just own this military, and if the military people decided, you know what, that's right, and they just went along with it. And they just said, we trust these generals more than we trust the elected representatives of the United States. Well, there you go. Democracy over. And I'm slightly of the opinion that we're already there. Given the extravagance of the wars that have been going on, the absurd lengths that have been taken in order to maintain those wars, the absurd amount of public capital that has been poured in to launching these crusades, which is what we should be calling them, crusades. The incredible amount of capital that's gone into it, it becomes very difficult for me to believe that it's public citizenry that is actually in control of any of this. Even if they are sort of these wealthy oligarchs, right? Even if they are in this sort of social position. Because ultimately there's going to come a time, and now's the time. Here's Bernie Sanders. He's gathered public support. The public support is surging. He's probably going to win Iowa tonight. But there's something that can be done within the democratic framework, and that's if the superdelegates just decide, because they can, that's the structure of the Democratic Party, to just override him. And they just say, nope, we're just not going to have a socialist run the Democratic Party. And they'll obfuscate and they'll lie and they'll create all the excuses. But at the end of the day, a military dictatorship will not allow a dovish, non-war focused candidate seize power. And if that happens, then they really are revealing, full frontal, like really are revealing that the democratic apparatus that exists in the United States is merely illusionary. That it always, that for decades now, it always just existed as a way to funnel the angst of the populace away from the streets and into the ballot box. You make the people vote for two candidates who are just going to maintain the war, maintain the capitalist system, and the owners of the society and the military dictatorship aren't going to do anything about that. Why would they prevent? Why would they bother moving? But if suddenly within this illusionary system comes someone who says, okay, the people have spoken, we are actually going to do something about this. We are going to stop these wars. We are going to stand up against the corporate oligarchs and the military dictatorship. And they'll just say no. And that'll be it. And any hope that people have about us building a more civil society, about building a more cohesive social network, about any of that kind of stuff, well, that's just not going to be part of the conversation. That ultimately, people want to believe that they will be able to get some assistance from sort of a higher authority, that they will be able to galvanize and collectivize the public. But the truth of the matter is that as we move forward into these next years, it really is just going to be us. It really is just going to be your neighbor. It really is just going to be the people who are beside you. And I don't mean like in your city. I mean when you go to work, it's going to be the people who are in the room with you, and then the people who work in the block around you. And those are the people who are going to be the support system who will determine the quality of your life. Because as the pirates and the plunderers and the military actors siphon everything out that they can from the society, eventually there comes a point where they have siphoned all that they can. That they can't make any more money. They can't make anything else. They can't actually grow in infinite ways. They can't actually do anything else. And so they'll retreat. They'll leave. And they'll just leave us all alone. And leave us to fend for ourselves. That's the most important part of this. They'll just leave us to fend for ourselves. And in those conditions, places like evangelical churches thrive because there's going to be a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of angst, and charlatans and liars and con men and gangsters do very well in these circumstances. They do very well in these circumstances because people have nowhere else to go. That's really what it comes down to. That if people have nowhere else to go, then they will just gravitate towards people who are saying any message at all that seems to be cohesive whatsoever. And this is how you get fascist leaders. People like Hitler, who galvanize people with racism, who galvanize people with rhetoric, who bring people together using their shared hatreds instead of creating a message of hope. These next few months will, in my view, tell the tale. Because Bernie Sanders, unlike previous, I used to believe in Ron Paul. I was a fan of Obama. I think like lots of people of my generation were. But, and I always understood from day one, whole Twin Towers into the Iraq War thing, I always understood that was all nonsense. That was all just, we viewed it in a decontextualized sense. And we pretended as though that the war began on 9/11. When really, we had been inflicting war upon the Middle East for decades before that. Even including like World War I and World War II, we were inflicting incredible devastation in that region. Overthrowing their leadership, coups, like people who are supportive of these wars really do think that like history begins September 11th, 2001. And the powers that be want to keep it that way. As long as we can pretend like we were the victims instead of participants in an ongoing and war of aggression. And here's something I keep saying. I keep saying this. How dare they fight back? This is sort of the thing. And I anytime I get talking to somebody who's pro-war and they start saying things like, oh, well, these people did this to us and these people did that to us. My comment is always, how dare they fight back? How dare they? The Americans have the largest military on the planet. They can obliterate any of these nations in a day. Like they can wreck a nation in a day. And they do, and they have, and they'll continue. And you're telling me that the actions of people who have like like single shot barrel rifles or AK-47s from the 60s that we sold them. You're telling me these guys, like, oh yeah, they did a thing. Okay, yeah. We dropped radioactive, nuclear-tipped shells on their children, so they'll be mutated for 3-4 generations yet to come. Oh yeah, but they, I don't know, took over some base somewhere. Oh, okay. Like, you gotta be kidding me. That's life for you. It's just kind of a joke, isn't it? So, proof will be in the pudding. It could go one of two ways, you know? And if they just stop Sanders, then that is kind of it. That is kind of it. The whole socialist upswing has got to stop going to the ballot box. And it has to start taking place in the streets. And it has to start becoming unrepentantly hostile to the political classes. When Justin Trudeau came to the climate marches and got his photo taken in the climate marches and was cheering alongside of people in the climate march, that was disgusting. We should have laid hands on him. We should have made it very clear that he was not welcome there. We should have made it very clear that his presence at that rally was not one that should be considered positive. We shouldn't have let him get his photo up, because that's all that was for him. He got his photo up, marching alongside of people, being like, yeah, the environment. And it was only after the fact that somebody points out, wait a minute, aren't you the damn leader of this place? Didn't we elect you as the leader of our country? Don't you have the authority and the power to actually face this and resolve this in a meaningful way? Oh, but you're not. Oh, interesting. You're coming out here to march with us. Oh, okay. You're a serious person who has serious objectives. We should take you seriously. Absolutely. And Trudeau's position, straight up, is that oh, well, we can't sacrifice the economy. We have to accommodate the economy, right? We can't just pull a switch and all that kind of stuff. What he is saying there is that we have to keep billionaires rich, you guys, right? Fuck all these people who got laid off, right? We're not going to pass a basic income. We're not going to help all these people who are destitute because of this shift. But the billionaires need to stay billionaires, and they need to keep making billions of dollars, guys. That's what it is. And if we don't let these billionaires continue making billions of dollars, then, oh, that's so bad. That's so bad. What do you think is going to happen when we finally actually do make the transition? Because they know that we have to. What do you think is going to happen to Alberta? Right? They're going to be abandoned. They're going to be abandoned. They're going to be abandoned by conservatives and liberals. And it's going to happen quickly. And all that's going to be left is anger and fear and resentment. And the conservatives are just going to wrap them in a little bow, tie them up, and say, it's those dang liberals' fault. And the liberals will just say, those conservatives. And then it'll just be blue-red again. And the idiots will vote for either of those parties, leaving the rest of us going, please stop voting for these two. They work for the same people. But we probably won't do that, because that's how people are. They're stuck. We're stuck in this sort of consistent, constant feedback loop. Anyway, this video is going on 40 minutes. I think I'm good. That's long enough for me to chirp away. I hope you guys are all having a good time out there. I hope you're having fun. Hold the ones you love closely. Love you guys. Have fun out there.